My name is Marcia, and at 28 years old, I never imagined I'd be grounded by my own father like some rebellious teenager. But there I was standing in his mahogany-panelled dining room, being told I couldn't return home until I apologized to his new wife, Stephanie, for calling out her suspicious behavior at our family dinner. My mother had been gone only 6 months, and this woman was already trying to erase her from our lives. Before I continue this unbelievable story, please let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to hear how a simple apology demand led to a $50 million disaster that changed our family forever. The relationship I had with my mother, Eleanor, was more than just mother and daughter. She was my mentor, my inspiration, and the reason I became who I am today. As one of the first female tech entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley back in the 90s, she built our family's fortune from nothing. She taught me to code when I was 8, took me to board meetings when I was 15, and by the time I graduated from MIT, she had already prepared me to take over parts of the family business. When the cancer diagnosis came, everything changed. Those final 6 months were the hardest of our lives. My father, Richard, who had always been the strong one, completely crumbled. He couldn't handle watching the woman he'd loved for 35 years slowly fade away. I remember sitting beside her hospital bed one evening when she grabbed my hand with surprising strength. She told me to protect what we had built, that there would be vultures circling once she was gone. At the time, I thought she was talking about business competitors or distant relatives who might come asking for money. I had no idea she was warning me about something much closer to home. After Mother passed, Father was lost. He stopped going to the office, stopped seeing friends, and spent most days just sitting in her study staring at their wedding photos. That's why when he suddenly announced he'd met someone at the country club 3 months after the funeral, we were actually relieved. Thomas, my younger brother, and I thought maybe this would help him heal. Stephanie appeared in our lives like a whirlwind. She was 42, blonde with that kind of polished beauty that looked expensive. She claimed to be a widow herself, said she understood Father's pain. Within weeks, she was at every family dinner, every business meeting, inserting herself into conversations about company decisions she had no business being part of. The red flag started small. I noticed her asking detailed questions about our family's investment portfolio during casual conversations. She would steer dinner talks toward company valuations and upcoming deals. Once I caught her photographing documents in Mother's study when she thought everyone was at the pool. When I confronted her, she laughed it off, said she was just admiring Mother's achievement awards and wanted to remember them. Then there were the phone calls. Late at night, I would see her in the garden speaking urgently into her phone. When anyone approached, she would quickly hang up and claim it was her sister in California, dealing with a time difference. But California was only 3 hours behind us in Boston, not enough to justify 2 a.m. calls. The worst part was watching her systematically erase my mother's presence. First, it was small things like moving Mother's favorite orchids from the entrance hall because she was supposedly allergic. Then she redecorated the guest rooms, removing family photos. When she suggested turning Mother's study into her personal yoga studio, I knew I had to say something. The confrontation that destroyed our family happened at Sunday dinner. It was supposed to be a celebration of Father's 65th birthday. The entire extended family was there. Cousins, aunts, uncles, even Father's business partners. I had gone upstairs to get Father's gift from my old room when I heard rustling from Mother's study. The door was slightly open, and I saw Stephanie inside, going through Mother's private files. These weren't just any files. Mother kept her most sensitive business documents in that cabinet, things she never even showed Father. Stephanie had them spread across the desk, taking photos with her phone. When I demanded to know what she was doing, she didn't even look guilty. She simply said she was helping Father organize old paperwork. I lost it. I marched back downstairs and in front of everyone accused her of snooping through our family's private documents. I called her a gold digger, said she was only after our money, and demanded Father open his eyes to what was happening. The room went silent. The look on Father's face was something I'll never forget. It wasn't concern or curiosity about my accusations. It was pure rage directed at me. He stood up, his face red, and told me I was a spoiled, jealous child who couldn't accept that he had found happiness again. He said I was dishonoring my mother's memory with my behavior, and that I was no longer welcome in his home until I apologized to Stephanie publicly. When I refused, he went further. I was banned from all family gatherings, blocked on all his devices, and cut off from the family trust fund. Being grounded at 28 was surreal. It wasn't just about not being allowed home. Father made sure everyone in our circle knew I was persona non grata. Business associates who had known me since childhood suddenly stopped returning my calls. Family friends looked away when they saw me at the grocery store. Even Thomas, my own brother, said I had gone too far and needed to apologize. The isolation was complete. In one evening, I went from being the heir apparent to the family business to being completely exiled. But what hurt most was that no one, not a single person, asked to hear my side of the story or wondered if maybe I had seen something worth investigating. 3 weeks into my exile, I remembered something Mother had given me just days before she died. It was an encrypted hard drive with a note that simply said, "When the time is right." I had put it in my apartment safe, too grief-stricken at the time to deal with it. Now alone and desperate to understand what was happening to my family, I decided the time was right. Cracking the encryption took me 4 days. Mother had used a combination of family dates and coding sequences she had taught me as a child. When I finally got in, what I found took my breath away. My mother, the woman I thought I knew everything about, had been keeping a massive secret. Eleanor hadn't just built one company. She had created a shadow corporation called Novatech Solutions, completely separate from the family business, completely unknown to my father. The documents showed patent filings, technology licenses, and intellectual property rights worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But more importantly, there was a video message from her recorded just a month before she died. In the video, she looked frail but determined. She explained that she had built Novatech as an insurance policy for the family. She had seen too many tech fortunes destroyed by bad marriages, bitter divorces, and predatory partners. She specifically mentioned being concerned about Father's trusting nature and his inability to see when people were taking advantage of him. The company was structured in such a way that it could protect our family's core assets if anything ever happened to the main business. She ended the message by saying she was transferring ownership to me through a trust that would activate on my 28th birthday, which had passed just 2 weeks ago. I was now the sole owner of a company worth more than our entire family business, and no one knew it existed. With this new knowledge, I hired a private investigator named Jennifer Park to look into Stephanie's background. What Jennifer found was disturbing. Stephanie Morrison wasn't even her real name. Over the past 15 years, she had been Stephanie Grant, Stephanie Williams, and Stephanie Hayes. Each identity corresponded with a different wealthy widower she had married. The pattern was always the same. She would meet them at exclusive clubs or charity events, always within a year of their wives' deaths. She would marry them quickly, and within 2 to 3 years, their fortunes would mysteriously diminish through bad investments or failed business deals. Her first husband, a real estate mogul in Dallas, went from being worth $80 million to filing for bankruptcy. Her second, a shipping magnate in Miami, lost his entire fleet in a series of suspicious accidents and contract failures. But Stephanie never worked alone. Jennifer discovered she had a business partner, a corporate lawyer named Marcus Winters, who specialized in mergers and acquisitions. He was the one who would approach the husbands with amazing investment opportunities or urgent deals that required quick decisions. Together, they had perfected the art of legal wealth extraction. My tech friend Daniel, who I'd known since college, helped me dig deeper into their current plan. We hacked into some of the email accounts associated with shell companies connected to Marcus Winters. What we found made my blood run cold. They weren't just planning to take some of Father's money, they were orchestrating the complete liquidation of our family's assets. The centerpiece of their plan was a $50 million merger deal between Father's company and Apex Industries, a tech conglomerate that had been aggressively pursuing us for years. On the surface, it looked like a good deal. The offer was generous, the terms seemed favorable, and it would allow Father to retire comfortably. But buried in subsection after subsection of legal jargon was a clause that would transfer all intellectual property rights to the buyer, including patents that Mother had filed under the family company before creating Novatech. What they didn't know was that Mother had been smart. The most valuable patents, the ones that were worth hundreds of millions, had been transferred to Novatech years ago. The family company held licenses to use them, but not ownership. Without those patents, both Father's company and the merger deal were essentially worthless. Daniel and I spent nights going through financial records, patent filings, and corporate structures. We discovered that Apex Industries had recently received a massive injection of capital from a private equity firm called Winter Star Holdings. 3 guesses who the managing partner was. Marcus Winters had essentially created an elaborate scheme to buy our company with borrowed money, strip it of what he thought were its valuable assets, and leave Father with nothing but debt. The timeline was accelerating. The merger was set to close in just 72 hours. Stephanie had been pushing father hard, telling him that waiting would mean losing the deal. She claimed other buyers were circling and that Apex might withdraw their offer. Every day she had a new reason why he needed to sign immediately. I needed proof that would hold up legally, not just suspicions and hacked emails. That's when Thomas finally reached out to me. He had been staying loyal to father publicly, but privately he had started noticing things too. He had seen Stephanie meeting with strangers at restaurants, always sitting in back corners, always passing documents back and forth. He had overheard a phone conversation where she mentioned something about the timeline and the final phase. Thomas agreed to help me gather evidence from inside the house. He took photos of documents Stephanie had left out, recorded conversations when he could, and most importantly, he found out about the signing ceremony. It was going to be a huge public event held at Apex Industries headquarters, with press coverage and everything. Stephanie had insisted on the spectacle, saying it would be good for the company's image. With Thomas secretly on my side, I knew I had to warn father through someone he still trusted. His executive assistant Margaret had been with him for 20 years. She was like family to us, and I hoped she might have noticed something was wrong. When I finally reached her at her home, she was relieved to hear from me. Margaret told me she had been documenting strange occurrences for weeks. Stephanie had asked her to sign several documents without letting her read them fully, claiming they were just routine household management papers. There had been money transfers to offshore accounts that father supposedly authorized, but never remembered approving. Most disturbing, she had noticed father's medication changing. His sleeping pills were stronger, his anxiety medication doses had doubled, and Stephanie was always the one giving them to him. Margaret had been too afraid to say anything, worried she would lose her job if she questioned the new wife. But she had kept copies of everything, created a paper trail that showed a clear pattern of financial manipulation and possible medical abuse. She agreed to help me, but we had to be careful. Stephanie had eyes everywhere. The night before the merger signing, Stephanie threw a celebration party at our family home. She invited all of Boston high society, framing it as a celebration of father's success and the company's bright future. I wasn't invited, of course, but Thomas made sure the security staff would let me in through the service entrance. I waited until the speeches started. Stephanie was up at the microphone talking about how proud she was of her husband, how this merger represented a new chapter for the family. That's when I walked in through the main doors, dressed in my mother's favourite red dress, holding a folder of evidence. The room went silent. Father's face went from confusion to rage in seconds. But before he could have security remove me, I spoke loudly and clearly. I announced that I had evidence that Stephanie and her associates were defrauding our family. I held up the documents showing her multiple identities, the shell companies, the connection to Marcus Winters. Stephanie was smooth, I'll give her that. She laughed, told everyone I was having a mental breakdown, that losing my mother had clearly affected me more than anyone realized. She suggested I needed professional help, that my jealousy had turned into dangerous delusions. Some people in the crowd were nodding, looking at me with pity. Father stood up and told security to escort me out. As they grabbed my arms, I played my last card. For that evening, I announced that anyone who participated in tomorrow's merger would be subject to a federal investigation for fraud. Then I was dragged out, but not before I saw doubt creeping into the faces of several board members. That night, Father's lawyer, Robert Stone, called me. He had been at the party and something about my accusations had bothered him. He had gone back to his office and reviewed the merger documents more carefully. He found discrepancies, things that didn't add up, terms that had been changed from what was originally discussed. He agreed to delay the signing pending further investigation. When Stephanie found out about the delay the next morning, she became desperate. Thomas told me she screamed at father for 2 hours, accused him of not trusting her, of letting his bitter daughter ruin their happiness. Then she switched tactics. She called in a doctor friend of hers, Dr. Paul Harrison, who after a brief consultation declared that father was showing early signs of dementia. She immediately filed for power of attorney, claiming father was no longer capable of making business decisions. The filing included the doctor's diagnosis and several incidents she had documented of father being confused or forgetful, all of which coincided with when his medication doses had been increased. If granted, she would have full control over all business decisions, including the merger. The hearing was expedited to that afternoon, the same day as the scheduled merger signing. Stephanie had Judge Patricia Coleman, who happened to be a member of the same country club, ready to rule in her favor. It was clear they had been planning this contingency for a while. But I had one more card to play, one that even I hadn't fully understood until that morning. Mother's video message had contained more than just information about Novatech. She had also revealed that several key patents that Apex Industries needed for their new product line were held exclusively by Novatech. Without those patents, their entire development pipeline would grind to a halt. They would be in breach of contracts with their own investors. I realized that I didn't just have defensive leverage. I had offensive power. If I revealed myself as the owner of Novatech at the merger signing, it wouldn't just stop the deal. It would potentially destroy Apex Industries and expose everyone involved in the fraud. The signing ceremony was scheduled for 3 p.m. at Apex Industries' gleaming downtown headquarters. The press was there, industry leaders were in attendance, and everything was set up for what should have been a straightforward transaction. Father was there looking confused and tired with Stephanie by his side, gripping his arm tightly. The power of attorney hearing had been postponed until the following day, giving us a narrow window. I arrived with my legal team led by Catherine Walsh, one of Boston's most formidable corporate attorneys. When we walked into the boardroom, Stephanie's face went white. She tried to have security remove us, but Catherine announced that I was there as the CEO of Novatech Solutions, a major patent holder with business interests related to the merger. The Apex CEO, James Morrison, looked confused until I laid out the documentation. Novatech owned 17 critical patents that Apex had been licensing through intermediaries. Without continued access to these patents, approximately 70% of their product line would be subject to immediate injunction. Their investors would have grounds to demand immediate repayment of $300 million in development funds. The room erupted. Board members were shouting, lawyers were frantically reviewing documents, and Father just sat there staring at me in shock. He had no idea Novatech existed, no idea that Mother had built an entire empire in parallel to what he thought was our family's only business. Stephanie tried to salvage the situation. She stood up and announced that I was lying, that these were forged documents, that I was trying to destroy Father's deal out of spite. But when Apex's legal team confirmed the patents were real and legally held by Novatech, her composure started to crack. That's when she made her biggest mistake. In her desperation, she turned to James Morrison and said something that revealed everything. She said they had discussed this possibility, that he had assured her all the patents were accounted for in the family company. It was an admission that they had been working together all along. James Morrison's face went pale as he realized what she had just revealed. The board members started asking questions. How did he know about the family's patent structure? Why had he been discussing it with Stephanie before the merger was even proposed? The connection became clear when Catherine revealed what my investigator had found. James Morrison wasn't just the CEO of Apex Industries. He was Stephanie's brother. They had different last names because Stephanie had been married so many times, but birth records confirmed they were siblings. Together with Marcus Winters, they had orchestrated this entire scheme. James had pushed for the merger from Apex's side, Stephanie had pushed Father from the family side, and Marcus had arranged the financing that would have let them strip the company of what they thought were its assets. The FBI agents arrived 20 minutes later. I had been working with the Financial Crimes Unit for weeks, feeding them information, helping them build a case. Wire fraud conspiracy, elder abuse, the charges were extensive. As they led Stephanie and James away in handcuffs, Stephanie turned to Father with tears in her eyes, still trying to manipulate him, telling him she loved him, and this was all a misunderstanding. Father collapsed into his chair as soon as they were gone. The revelation that Mother had kept such a massive secret from him, that his daughter had been right all along, that he had chosen a con artist over his own family, it was too much. He aged 10 years in 10 minutes. The $50 million deal was dead. Apex Industries' stock price plummeted 40% within hours as news of the scandal broke. The board called an emergency meeting and voted no confidence in the entire executive team. Several major contracts were cancelled as partners lost faith in the company's leadership. Within a week, Apex would file for bankruptcy protection. But the damage to Father's company was also severe. The news that the CEO had been manipulated by a con artist, that he had nearly sold the company in a fraudulent deal, destroyed investor confidence. The stock price dropped 20%. 3 board members resigned immediately. Major clients started looking for other suppliers, worried about stability. Father's lifetime of work was crumbling around him. The empire he and Mother had built together was falling apart, not because of market forces or competition, but because he had been too proud to listen to his own daughter, too desperate for companionship, to see the warning signs, too stubborn to admit he might be wrong. As we left the Apex building that day, Father couldn't even look at me. The validation I had thought I would feel was replaced by a deep sadness. I had been right, but being right had cost our family everything. In the days following the arrest, the full scope of Father's losses became clear. The $50 million deal wasn't just dead, it had become a liability. Apex was suing for breach of contract, claiming Father had negotiated in bad faith. Other business partners were pulling out of deals, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. The media was having a field day with headlines about the millionaire who almost lost everything to a black widow. Father isolated himself in his study, refusing to see anyone, including me. The house that had been full of Stephanie's friends and party planners was now empty and quiet. The medication fog was lifting, and with clarity came the crushing weight of what had happened. I stood at a crossroads. I had Novatech worth more than enough to start fresh, to build my own empire separate from the family drama. I could have let Father's company fail, let him experience the full consequences of his choices. Part of me wanted to. The hurt from being exiled, from being called jealous and bitter, from having my own father choose a stranger over me, it was still raw. But Thomas helped me see past my anger. He had been staying with Father, making sure he was eating, taking proper medication, not the cocktail Stephanie had been feeding him. He told me about Father crying over Mother's photo, apologizing to her for betraying her memory, for not protecting what they had built together. Thomas became our mediator. He helped Father understand how grief had made him vulnerable, how Stephanie had studied him, learned his weaknesses, and exploited them. The woman Father thought he loved never existed. She was a character carefully crafted to appeal to his specific needs and desires. The realization that every moment of their relationship had been a lie broke something in him. It took Father 3 weeks to finally ask to see me. When I walked into his study, I barely recognized him. He had lost weight, his hair had gone completely grey, and the confident businessman I had known my whole life was gone. In his place was a broken man who had lost everything, including his sense of self. His apology was different from what I had expected. He didn't make excuses, didn't try to justify his behavior. He simply said he had failed as a father, as a husband to Mother's memory, and as a steward of our family's legacy. He said he understood if I could never forgive him, but he wanted me to know that he finally saw the truth. He told me about the therapy sessions he had started dealing not just with Stephanie's betrayal, but with the grief he had never properly processed after Mother's death. He was beginning to understand how his desperation to avoid pain had made him an easy target for manipulation. The therapist had helped him see that Stephanie had used classic techniques of elder abuse isolation, medication, manipulation, and financial exploitation. The decision to merge Novatech with the family company wasn't easy. It would mean revealing more of Mother's secrets, changing the entire structure of our business, and essentially admitting publicly that I was now in charge. But it was the only way to save what my parents had spent 35 years building. The merger was complex. Novatech's patents and technology assets would revitalize the family company, but it also meant bringing in new leadership. Father would remain as chairman emeritus, a largely ceremonial role, while I would become CEO. We brought in a new board of directors, people with no connection to the old guard who had enabled Father's mistakes. The corruption ran deeper than just Stephanie. Several board members had been receiving kickbacks from Marcus Winters for supporting the Apex deal. Our CFO had been manipulating numbers to make the company look weaker than it was justifying the need for a quick sale. The cleanup required forensic accountants, legal teams, and a complete restructuring of our corporate governance. We implemented new policies about family involvement in business decisions, third-party verification for major deals, and mandatory cooling-off periods for any transaction over $10 million. These were the safeguards Mother had tried to implement years ago, but Father had resisted, calling them unnecessary bureaucracy. The family healing happened slowly. We started with weekly therapy sessions, just Father, Thomas, and me. The therapist helped us navigate the complex emotions of betrayal, guilt, and grief that had torn us apart. Father had to confront his tendency to avoid difficult emotions, his pride that prevented him from listening to others, and his deep-seated fear of being alone. I had to work through my resentment, not just about Stephanie, but about years of feeling like Father valued the business more than his children, about always being compared to Mother's impossible standard, about the burden of being the responsible one, while Thomas got to be the free spirit. Thomas surprised us both by revealing how the family dynamics had affected him. He had played the neutral party, but inside, he had been struggling with his own grief and feeling overlooked in the family drama. The therapy sessions became a place where we could finally be honest with each other. 6 months after Stephanie's arrest, we held a memorial for Mother at her favourite spot on Cape Cod. It was the first time we had all been together there since before she got sick. Father finally spoke about his grief, about how desperate he had been to fill the void she left, how sorry he was for dishonoring her memory. We scattered some of her ashes in the ocean, keeping the rest for the garden she had loved. The trial of Stephanie Morrison, James Morrison and Marcus Winters became one of the biggest financial fraud cases in Massachusetts history. As the investigation deepened, more victims came forward. There were 7 other families who had been targeted over the past 15 years. The pattern was always the same, targeting widowers in their moment of greatest vulnerability. The evidence we had gathered was overwhelming. Financial records showing systematic theft, medical records showing manipulation through medication, and a paper trail of shell companies and offshore accounts stretching back years. Stephanie tried to play the victim, claiming she had been manipulated by her brother and Marcus, but recordings Thomas had made proved she was the ringleader. The judge sentenced Stephanie to 20 years in federal prison for wire fraud conspiracy and elder abuse. James got 15 years and Marcus received 12. The court ordered full restitution to all victims, though most of the money had already been spent or hidden in offshore accounts that would take years to recover. During the trial, we learned more about Stephanie's background. She had grown up poor, watching her mother struggle after their father abandoned them. Somewhere along the way, she had decided that wealthy men owed her something, that taking their money was justified payback for her own suffering. It didn't excuse what she did, but it explained the cold calculation behind the warmth she projected. Father attended every day of the trial. He needed to see it through to the end to understand fully how he had been deceived. Some days were harder than others, especially when prosecutors played recordings of Stephanie talking to her brother about how easy it was to manipulate the lonely old fool. But he faced it all, part of his commitment to never be that vulnerable again. The company's recovery was faster than anyone expected. The combination of Novatech's assets and the sympathy generated by the scandal actually strengthened our position in the market. Clients who had been ready to jump ship stayed out of loyalty to Mother's memory and respect for how I had protected the family legacy. We renamed the combined company Eleanor Technologies, honouring Mother's vision and making clear that this was a new beginning. The rebranding campaign focused on innovation, integrity, and family values, not the old boys club mentality that had made Father vulnerable to manipulation. Within a year, the company was valued at $200 million, 4 times what the Apex deal would have been worth. We had launched 3 new product lines based on Novatech's patents, entered international markets Mother had been eyeing for years, and established an innovation lab that attracted top talent from around the world. But the biggest change was in our corporate culture. We implemented an employee ownership program, giving every worker a stake in the company's success. We created a foundation in Mother's name that supported women in tech, funded by a percentage of annual profits. We established a board that was 50% women, 50% people under 40, bringing in perspectives that had been missing for too long. Father found unexpected purpose in his new limited role. He became a speaker at conferences about elder financial abuse, sharing his story to help other families avoid similar situations. He worked with law enforcement to develop training programs for recognizing the signs of financial predators targeting vulnerable seniors. His vulnerability in sharing his mistakes helped hundreds of other families. He also found love again, the right way this time. Barbara was a widow he met in his grief support group. They took things slowly, going on chaperoned dates with other group members, building a friendship first. She had her own money, her own life, and no interest in the family business. When they married 2 years later in a small ceremony at our Cape house, it felt like a real celebration of finding happiness after loss. Thomas found his place in the company too. He had always avoided the business, not wanting to compete with me for Father's approval. But the new structure gave him freedom to explore his own interests. He headed our venture capital arm, investing in startups that aligned with our values. His easygoing personality and genuine interest in people made him perfect for nurturing new talent. My own journey was more complex. Learning to trust again after such a betrayal wasn't easy. I found myself scrutinizing every new person who entered our lives, looking for signs of deception. But my relationship with Daniel, which had started as friendship and collaboration during the investigation, slowly evolved into something more. Daniel had seen me at my worst, desperate and paranoid, hacking into emails, and convinced everyone was against me. He had believed me when no one else would, helped me without asking for anything in return. When he finally asked me on a proper date 6 months after the trial ended, I realized I had been waiting for him to ask. We took things slowly, both of us aware of how trauma could affect judgment. But what we built was real, based on shared values, mutual respect, and the understanding that came from having weathered a crisis together. when he proposed at the Innovation Lab dedication ceremony using code he had written that spelled out, "Will you marry me in binary across every screen in the building?" I said yes, without hesitation. 2 years have passed since that terrible dinner where Father demanded I apologize to Stephanie. As I sit in Mother's old office now, mine running the empire she secretly built for me, I can see how every piece fell into place exactly as she had planned. The hard drive, the timing of the trust transfer, even the video message she had anticipated, all of it. The grounding that was meant to punish me became my liberation. Cut off from the family business, I was forced to find my own way to discover the resources Mother had left for me. If Father had listened to my concerns, if he had investigated instead of exiling me, would I have ever looked at that hard drive? Would I have discovered Novatech in time to save us? Perhaps Mother knew that sometimes we need to be pushed away to find our true strength. That $50 million deal Father lost was a blessing disguised as a disaster. If it had gone through, we would have lost everything Mother had built, not just the money, but the innovations, the patents, the future she had envisioned. The scandal that seemed to destroy our reputation actually revealed our resilience. We emerged stronger, more unified, and more successful than ever before. I think about Stephanie sometimes sitting in her federal cell, wondering if she ever reflects on how different things could have been. If she had genuinely cared for Father, if she had been the person she pretended to be, she would have inherited millions eventually anyway. But greed and impatience destroyed any chance of legitimate happiness she might have found. The irony isn't lost on me that the woman who tried to steal our fortune actually helped us discover a greater one. Without her scheming, Novatech might have remained hidden until it was too late to save the family business. Without her betrayal, Father and I might never have repaired our relationship. Without the crisis she created, our family might have continued in dysfunction for years. Every month, our family has dinner together, just us, no business associates or plus ones, unless they've been thoroughly vetted and genuinely accepted. We laugh about it now, our paranoia about new people, but it's a small price to pay for protecting what we've rebuilt. These dinners are sacred, a time to remember that wealth isn't just about money, but about the bonds that hold us together. The company continues to thrive beyond anything Mother or Father originally envisioned. We've expanded into artificial intelligence, renewable energy technology, and biomedical devices. The Innovation Lab has produced 12 patents in 2 years, each one carefully protected under the new corporate structure I implemented. Eleanor Technologies is now studied in business schools as an example of successful crisis management and corporate restructuring. But the real measure of our success isn't in the numbers or the accolades. It's in the quiet moments when Father tells me he's proud of the leader I've become. It's in Thomas's excitement when he discovers a startup that could change the world. It's in the young women who come up to me at conferences saying Mother's story inspired them to pursue careers in technology. The truth about family wealth is that it attracts predators, like blood in the water attracts sharks. But it also teaches you invaluable lessons about trust, vigilance, and the importance of protecting those you love. Sometimes that protection means standing alone against everyone, even those closest to you. Sometimes it means being called jealous, bitter, and delusional while you fight to save people who don't want to be saved. I learned that grief makes people vulnerable in ways they never expect. Father wasn't weak or stupid. He was human, dealing with unimaginable loss, and someone took advantage of that vulnerability. It could happen to anyone, which is why sharing our story matters. If it helps even one family recognize the warning signs, then our pain served a purpose. The concept of trust has evolved for all of us. We trust, but we verify. We love, but we protect ourselves. We welcome new people, but we watch for red flags. It might seem cynical to some, but we prefer to think of it as wisdom earned through experience. Trust isn't given automatically anymore. It's earned slowly through consistent actions over time. Looking back, every painful moment was a teacher in disguise. The isolation taught me self-reliance. The investigation taught me diligence. The confrontation taught me courage. The aftermath taught me forgiveness. And the rebuilding taught me that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, but success and happiness, despite those who tried to destroy you. My mother always said that real wealth isn't in bank accounts, but in the wisdom to protect what truly matters. She was right, of course. She usually was. The money could have been lost and recovered. The company could have failed and been rebuilt. But if we had lost each other, if the family had permanently fractured, that would have been the real tragedy. Now, when young entrepreneurs ask me for advice, I tell them to build more than just businesses. Build safeguards, build accountability, build relationships strong enough to withstand crisis, And always, always trust your instincts when something feels wrong, even if the whole world is telling you you're crazy. The hardest part of this entire journey was learning to forgive not just Father for his blindness, not just Thomas for his initial betrayal, but myself for not finding a way to stop it sooner. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing what happened. It's about releasing the poison of resentment so you can move forward. It's about choosing healing over hatred, growth over grudges. Sometimes the worst thing that happens becomes your greatest teacher. That grounding meant to punish me became my liberation. That $50 million deal Father lost was worth it to gain back our family's soul. And that truth that seemed to destroy everything actually set us free to build something better. Every time I walk through our offices, I see Mother's influence everywhere, not just in the technology we develop or the values we uphold, but in the very structure that protects us from future threats. She knew that success attracts predators, that wealth makes you a target, that love can blind you to danger. So she built fail-safes into our legacy hidden treasures that would only reveal themselves when we needed them most. The greatest inheritance she left wasn't the money or the patents or even Novatech itself. It was the foresight and courage to stand guard over those we love, even when they can't see the danger themselves. It was the wisdom to build protection into the foundation of everything we create. It was the understanding that sometimes love means being the villain in someone else's story until they're ready to see the truth. As I finish telling you this story, I want you to remember that every family has vulnerabilities. Every success story has moments of near destruction. Every fortune, whether measured in millions or in memories, needs protection. The predators are out there wearing beautiful masks and offering comfort to the grieving. They're patient, skilled, and utterly without conscience. But we're not helpless. We have instincts that warn us when something's wrong. We have the ability to investigate, to verify, to protect. We have the strength to stand alone when necessary and the wisdom to rebuild when the storm passes. Most importantly, we have each other, and that's the only wealth that truly matters in the end. So to everyone watching who's dealing with family betrayal, who's been called crazy for seeing what others refuse to see, who's standing alone trying to protect people who don't want protection, know that you're not alone. Trust your instincts. Document everything. Build your case carefully. And remember that sometimes being exiled is the first step toward becoming the protector your family needs. The $50 million deal is gone, but our family is whole. The fortune Stephanie tried to steal has doubled under proper management. The father who exiled me now speaks with pride about his daughter, the CEO. The brother who sided against me is now my closest advisor. And the mother who kept secrets left us the keys to our own salvation. This is what victory looks like. Not the absence of scars, but the strength they represent. Not the prevention of all pain, but the growth that comes from surviving it. Not a family without flaws, but one that faced its demons and came out stronger. And that's worth more than any deal, any fortune, any apology that was never given. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have apologized to keep the peace? Would you have walked away and let the chips fall? Or would you have fought like I did, risking everything to save people who didn't want to be saved? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences with family, betrayal, or financial predators. Please share your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you think about your own family's vulnerabilities, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about triumph over betrayal. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that standing up for truth, even when you stand alone, is always worth it. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the greatest inheritance you can leave your children isn't money, but the wisdom and courage to protect what matters most.